Hi, welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. The holidays are upon us, and it can be a moment when we reflect on how much we have and also how much we don't have. December is when this episode will air, and we are reminded of those spending it alone by choice and by not. There's this word in Welsh, I can't even say it, but it says a whole harath. It says it's untranslatable in any other language. It says a homesickness for somewhere you cannot return to, the nostalgia and grief for that lost places of your past, places that you never were. It's kind of haunting, but at the same time, we have this tendency during this time of year to kind of sometimes it can be some of the most heartbreaking times because of the reflection of what or who is no longer with us today. Today we have a new guest. His name is Terry. I'm so excited to have him here. He's a cancer survivor and has a unique and positive bent to the idea of mental health and self-improvement. Thank you, Terry, for taking your time to share your insight with us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Robert. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
No problem. I like to share those who are listening around the world, but here in the U.S., if you are in crisis, please seek appropriate professional help at 1-800-273-8255 is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I do know that there's people around the world, so I did look up some other national suicide helplines. In the UK, it's 0800-689-5652, and in Australia, it's I don't know how this. Well, you can look up the link at the bottom. It's 131114 if you are in crisis. But I encourage all those who are listening around the world to find what's available when it comes to resources. Terry, I always start out with quotes because I know people say it better than I do. And Desmond Tutu said it this way. He says, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all the darkness." What comes to mind when you hear this quote?
Actually, a story, to be honest with you. I remember reading about a study that was done at Johns Hopkins University back in the 1950s. And it was a very simple study. This professor took rats and he put them in a tank of water that was over their head. And he wanted to see how long the rats could tread water. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes before they were getting ready to sink and to drown. And just as they were about ready to go under, he reached in, pulled them out, dried them off, and let them rest for a while. And then he took those same rats and he put them back in that exact same tank of water.
Yeah.
And the second time around, those rats treaded water for 60 hours. Think about that. 15 minutes the first time, 60 hours the second time, which to me says two things. One, the importance of hope in our lives. We've got to have hope. We've got to be looking for something better on the horizon, depending on where we are right now. And two, just how much more our physical bodies can handle than we ever thought they could. So when you sent me that quote earlier, I was thinking, boy, that story came right into my head. I know it's kind of a graphic story with rats and water, but I think it really illustrates the importance of hope.
I love how you mentioned you tie in hope in all that's in one of the books I've been reading. Well, I read before that kind of inspired me, and some of these thoughts was from Viktor Frankl, Man Finding Meaning, and he would say he had this observation. I'm paraphrasing, but he said there are people who give half their bread. They will tend to serve other people, and some may say rationally, like, "Well, you're giving some of your sustenance away." But there was something that was different. He said in Lamenting, he said they thought there was another day. They thought there was some of those, and that was another kind of sustenance that they didn't even realize. And that hope aspect is highly powerful, especially when you're kind of looking. If you don't think there is anything better, it does get bleak quickly, especially in those rainy days. Strength, a lot of times, right now it's football season. And with that, we never like the ones who are stacked. We like the underdogs, and because the chips are not in their favor, but a lot of times, great teamwork, but more so that they persevere through the losses. They muster up the strength to say, it didn't work this time, I'll try again tomorrow. And I find that that's more in regards to recovery, regards to hope, than the concepts we're talking about, I find that strength more sustainable because it's something we learn and we build on. When you mentioned a little bit of finding hope with the story. What does finding hope mean to you personally? When you those words together, finding hope. What are you finding? What was it? Why are we finding, and why is that important?
Yeah, I liked your story about football season and building on that idea, because for me, you can't tell this from looking at me, but I'm 6'8" tall and I played basketball in college. So from the time I was 9 years old until the time I graduated from college, I was involved in team sports. And what team sports taught me was the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. Yeah. And that, if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, your parents down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. Yeah. And I am involved now in a clinical trial. You mentioned about my cancer journey for these tumors that I have in my lungs. And this trial probably won't save my life, but it very well may save the life of somebody 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And for me, that's hope. That's giving hope to another individual who I'll never know. And that to me is back to part of being something that's bigger than yourself.
Yeah, it's I find it so inspiring when even though people will say, well, chips are stacked against me, I have this chronic illness or something that may be terminal moving forward, but finding hope, finding that silver lining, finding that, my life does matter. I can help people, and that is more fulfilling than me just obtaining things in life, but becoming something more. It's just this idea of not just obtaining. A lot of times in life we're trying to I want to get this job, this title, but when we start truly becoming, start integrating certain things, some hope, and also serving others, not just because to get a pat on our back, but because we truly want to help, because we actually empathize. And it just takes this outward centeredness that kind of I find is very, at least, cathartic and helpful in my experience. This one quote, it says, leave everything undefined, including yourself. Befriend uncertainty. Fall in love with mystery. Kneel at the altar of not knowing. Give your questions time to breathe, and the answers will find you. Before you, I want to hear your take. A lot of times I feel we're too rushed to kind of say what things are or come up with some solutions. Sometimes slowing down, at least my experience, has been very helpful. So in this quote, I thought it was haunting because people could take it any avenue, whether they're faith-based or not. There's some wisdom in the idea of slowing down and allowing yourself to realize there's uncertainty everywhere we go. We try to make it like it's certainty, but it's not. Well, what's your take when you listen to this quote?
Yeah, I think it's a great quote. I think we kind of look at things, and I always tell people, our brains are hardwired to avoid pain and discomfort. So to the brain, the status quo is great, but the only way you're going to grow, the only way you're going to get better, the only way you're going to prove yourself is if you step outside of that status quo. So what I recommend to people every day is that they do one thing that makes them uncomfortable, that makes them uncertain, that potentially is embarrassing. Because if you do that every day, when the big stuff comes, it's kind of like, the old quote, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. If you think about, oh my God, I've got to get better at whatever, let's just say I got to get better at sales. I'm a salesman. I've got to get better at that. Well, instead of saying I've got to get better at sales, what if you said I'm going to get 1% better every day? Think about that. You don't have to get better at sales. You get 1% better at sales every single day. At the end of 30 days, you're 30% better than when you started. At the end of 2 months, you're 60% better than when you started. So it's much easier to break it down into something that we can handle instead of looking at this, oh my gosh, I've got to get better at sales, or I've got to eat this elephant. Just eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah, and I feel like, especially this time of year, and not minimizing, there's seasonal depression. There's people who, especially through this COVID, a lot of empty chairs, a lot of people who used to be there. So what I like to say, especially with relationships, people who are still here, I'd rather be uncomfortable than be bitter. At the long run, I've seen it go sideways. I don't care how right I am, because if I'm super right, it makes the other person super wrong. So I'd rather make bridges than walls in that regard. So relationships are very complex and in regards to uncertainty and in regards to what we're talking about here. But I do like the 1%, because each day, if you look at the whole picture of things, it's going to be overwhelming. Like, at the same time, it also is highly cathartic to kind of go through the process of growing and being better, not because you're doing it not to prove yourself to anyone but yourself. When it becomes internal, that I want to be better. One thing I remember, I used to I went to school for marketing and other stuff, was even if I don't make a sale, I have to make, even if I don't make the sale, make the other person feel better than they did before they spoke to you. It's commonplace that the connections and the communication we make is building relationships. Whether the sale or whatever you do doesn't work out, our ability to communicate is highly important, especially whether it's at work, relational, home, everything. Us being able to reflect, and I think this quote kind of helps us slow down, because in this world we live in, a lot of times it's like, hurry, 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 hurry. I have no time. We always talk about we need more time, but we never have enough time. We take vacations, but we don't have time for any of. But when we slow down and actually, we're talking right now. One thing I miss, especially talking to people, is making the person feel like they're only one in the room. It's a skill that's getting lost. A lot of times it's like, well, I'm looking at my phone, I'm super busy and super ineffective. Being able to set boundaries is very highly helpful in my recovery, but also gives my self-respect and knows what my limits are, and also helps me get that 1% better each and every day, because I'm allowing myself to. But I do, and despite the quote, we taught in the faith-based element, I found the concept of uncertainty, and that's what I want to tie into, and I want to hear whatever you're comfortable with about your story and what made you do what you're doing today. I did in my church. One of the sermons I did one time was, can you go on a mission trip without a camera? I thought it was hilarious, because a lot of people don't like that one. So in the same concept, obviously there's not, for me, I find it kind of funny, because we ask these questions. But Terry, you have experience in certain in your life. Obviously right now you're going through some treatment that you're not even sure it will help or not, but at the same time you're finding much hope, and I want to hear from your words. What was that experience like? What brought you to that, and any other things that you think you want to share to those listening today?
Sure. So I'll give you a kind of a quick rundown of my 9-year cancer journey, and I'll do the best I can. So 2012, I'm a girls' high school basketball coach, and I have a callus break open on the bottom of my foot, right below my third toe. And being a coach, you're on your feet a lot, so I don't think too much about it initially. But after it doesn't heal for a couple weeks, I go see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine, and he takes an x-ray, and he's like, Terry, I think you have a little cyst in there, and I can cut it out. And he does, and he shows it to me. Just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it. No blood, no dark spots, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But he sent it off to pathology. And then 2 weeks later, I get a call from him. And he said, he's kind of hemming and hawing. And as I said, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he's having telling me what's going on, the more frightened I'm becoming, until he just lays it out. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen this form of cancer. You have a rare form of melanoma that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And I recommend you go to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston to be treated. And I did. And I had the bottom of my foot excised, and all the lymph nodes in my groin removed. And then when I healed, I was put on a weekly injection of a drug called interferon to help keep the disease from coming back. The side effects of interferon for me was I had flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week for 5 years. And then I ended up in the intensive care unit with a fever of 108 degrees in 2017 because of the toxicity of the drug. So I had to stop it then. The cancer immediately came back. 2018, had my left foot amputated. The disease worked its way up my leg into my shin, had 2 more surgeries in 2019. And then last year, an undiagnosed tumor in my ankle area grew large enough that it fractured my tibia, my shin bone. And my only recourse during the pandemic was to have my left leg amputated above the knee. And I also found out I had tumors in my lungs, which I'm being treated for now. And I know that sounds like, I remember I've listened to one of your podcasts. We're talking about a Winston Churchill quote. This is another quote that Churchill had many years ago. He said, if you're going through hell, keep going. Yeah. And I think most people would look at my story and say, yeah, you've kind of been through the ringer on this one. But I look at it this way, we're all going to experience pain in our life. And it doesn't have to be cancer. It doesn't have to be a chronic illness. It could be something as simple as, you flunk a test at school, or you break up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, or you don't get the promotion at work that you think you deserve. Pain is inevitable. Yeah. Suffering, on the other hand, suffering's optional. Suffering's what you do with that pain. Do you take that pain and use it to make you a stronger and more determined individual? Or do you wallow in it and want to feel sorry for yourself and have other people feel sorry for you? That right there is a choice, and it's your choice totally how you handle it. Now, I mean, you're looking at me right now. There's no S on my chest. I don't wear a cape. I'm a human being. I have bad days. I cry. I get down. I get depressed. But when I do, I think back, in all honesty, to that story I told you earlier about the rat, because I realized that no matter how down I am, no matter how depressed I am, no matter how much I'm hurting, I can do so much more than I think I can. We put up impediments in our way to prevent us from being successful. The choice is yours. Do you want to use your pain to make you a better person, or do you want to use your pain to have people feel sorry for you?
And, I like a lot of times, people dealing with pain. I'm not minimizing anyone going through the pain that they are going through. What I like what you're saying, Terry, is there is a choice. And sometimes when I think about that choice that you're talking about, I said, I'd rather be uncomfortable than bitter. Now, when I think about self-wallowing and all that stuff, it develops, at least from my experience, it develops horrible communication skills. It also develops some unexpected manipulation, because you need to kind of get something a certain way, because the pain, you want to get the attention. And I'm not saying this because I've experienced this. When I was going through what I went through, I didn't know. I said, well, I have a choice. Like, do I just stay afraid? Do I stay afraid and be consumed with all this pain, or do I try to do something else? And that's the choice you're talking about, because I've seen even those who are, maybe, like you said, it doesn't have to be this huge thing. It just, you have a choice whether I'm going to just, am I going to just say, this is so bad in my life, what I'm going through, and just hold on to it? Or do you do something with it that could be positive for someone else? And it's a choice that takes step by step, but I would say it's what has been one of the most healing things for me. I remember when I first was starting to get better, I was in the church. I wasn't even in anything. I didn't even listen to the sermons. I didn't care. I was doing the sound because I'm pretty good at sound equipment. And I would say, I'm not listening to this stuff, but I'm just going to serve and just having the person be heard well, because I was pretty good at it. So that's all I focused on, was doing that. And sometimes it's those baby steps. And that goes back to let's not rush. If you're looking towards how well you're doing against other people, you already missed the mark in some ways. You have to kind of look at yourself and be totally honest. And when you're actually really honest, from my experience, there's a lot of cathartic healing at that. You're kind of saying, okay, this really sucks. In the military, I was in the Air Force, but we say embrace the suck. Because the thing is, if you avoid it, some bad things can happen. Avoid it, you can actually develop. And I would say some people don't think is this as such a bad thing, but you could develop some really ineffective communication. And I think right now communication, even though we have all these modes and platforms, is highly lacking. And when it rains in its pores, and if you go through life impulsively and you're not measured and not growing in a way that's 1% better or something that you're aiming towards, whether it's faith-based or whatever you find, whatever defines success to you, I find that in itself is a choice that people make each and every day. Am I going to say it here, this all happened to me because 10 years ago this happened to me? And you kind of, for me, I just hear it in church and in my surroundings, is when the best Thanksgiving, we're about to get to Thanksgiving, is 10 years ago, something's wrong. Why can't the best Thanksgiving be this one, or the next one? A lot of times we kind of measure, so we get nostalgia. Nostalgia is nice to remember those, but it's also, like in the beginning, we're talking about Viktor Frankl. When we think there's a brighter day ahead, there's that kind of hope, that cathartic, that fertilization that kind of is a process of healing. It's different for everyone. I really appreciate, Thomas Edison said this way, our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always just to try one more time. He failed so many times with a light bulb and he kept doing it. I remember George Bernard Shaw, he said something like, and I find it very, very much true. He said very bold. He said, those should not tell people what they can't do from the people who are actually doing it. Kind of saying, because a lot of times we're really sideliners. Oh, that's too hard. That's too this or that. But I like that he this right between the eyes. And I really love your story. Is inspiring because it's different. And every story is different. And I do appreciate everyone coming in here. And I feel the road of recovery is so wide. But I feel when you're concentrating, not these like arbitrary, impulsive obtaining things, but actually working on yourself. And I find it extremely inspiring. And your story, yes, some may say, oh, that's a lot. But, at the same time, it's hugely, I'm listening to it, it's hugely inspiring to know that someone who's going through that is that finds so much healing and so much hope in helping others. And I just want to commend you on that. Involving your story and personal experience with those listening and regarding uncertainty, what would you like to also share and to add to what you're sharing with your story? Any final thoughts, anything you want to add? What have you been up to? Anything you want to, if listeners want to know more about what you're up to or anything like that, they'll be in the notes. This is just some time. I really appreciate your insight. I have another friend who, on February, is World Cancer Day, February. And, I had him come on because he was in remission after 4th stage cancer. He's one of my good friends, Rick Perez. And, I always, my wife, her mom died from cancer, so like a while back. So for me, it's a big C word, but at the same time, I'm very inspired by your story. Thank you so much, Terry. Anything you want to share for those? Any final thoughts you want to share with those listening today?
Yeah, a couple of things. You're absolutely right. I mean, I've had numerous people come up to me and say, Terry, I could never do what you did. I could never go through what you've gone through. And I sort of smart alecky say, yeah, you're right. You couldn't, because you've already decided in your head that you can't do this. And, if you think about it, our brains can hold one thought at a time. Why would you want to make that a negative thought? When I was in college, guys used to go out and party before a big test. And, then they'd come into the test. And what would they say? Oh, man, I'm going to blow this test. I didn't study. Why would you say that to yourself? Why wouldn't you at least give yourself the opportunity to say, all right, I didn't study last night, but I paid attention in class and I'm going to do great on this study. If you go into something deciding that you're not going to be successful, I'm going to tell you right now, just don't do it. It's not worth your time and your frustration. And I always tell people, especially young people, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you think you should do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of your life, you're not going to be worried about the things that you did. You're going to be worried about the things that you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them. God is not going to judge you on what I say or what Robert says.
Yeah.
He's going to judge you on what you say and what you do. And I'll leave you with this final story. I've always been a big fan of Westerns growing up. And in 1993, you may have seen this, the movie Tombstone came out. It starred Kurt Russell as a man by the name of Wyatt Earp and Val Kilmer as a man by the name of John Doc Holliday. Now, Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday were two living, breathing human beings who actually walked on the face of the earth. They're not just made-up characters in the movie. And Doc was called Doc because he was a dentist by trade, but pretty much he was a gunslinger and a card shark. And Wyatt was a lawman his entire life. And here these two men from entirely opposite backgrounds form this very close friendship. And at the end of the movie, Doc is dying at a sanitarium in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, which is actually about 3 hours from my house. And the real Doc Holliday died in that sanitarium, and he's buried in the Glenwood Springs Cemetery. And Wyatt at this point in his life is destitute. He has no money, he has no job, he has no prospects for a job. So every day he comes to play cards with his friend to pass the time. And they're talking about what they want out of life. And Doc says, I was in love with my cousin when I was younger, but she joined a convent over the affair. But she's all I ever wanted. And he looks at Wyatt and he says, what about you, Wyatt? What do you want? And Wyatt says, I just want to lead a normal life. And Doc looks at him and says, there's no normal, there's just life. Robert, you and I know people out there that are just kind of sitting back. And it's like, when this happens, I'll have a normal life. When that happens, I'll have a successful life. When this happens, I'll have a significant life. What I'm saying is, don't wait for life to come to you. Go out there and find the reason that God put you on the face of this earth and live that reason. Because if you do, I'll promise you two things. At the end of your life, you'll be a whole lot happier and you'll have a whole lot more peace in your heart.
I watched Tombstone, and I'm trying to remember that scene, but yeah, it's very telling. For me, I was a leader. I am still a leader in church, and sometimes you go to hospice, and you kind of see how things are at the end. And it's not about any titles. It's not about it's really not about how important the person was. It's about the connections and what they build. What was success for them? He wanted a normal life. Normal, I feel, gets overused. It's not. There's no normal. It's just you. I love the attitude. Attitude does a lot. I see. When I was back in my young years, I did track and field a bit, and I remember I went to. Me and my brother both went to nationals, and you saw these people amazingly talented. And you're just like, you feel defeated. But for me, I just was humbled, just how people can be so good at certain things. Even music, same thing. There's a million great singers, musicians out there, but it's not about that. It's about what do you want? And I do like the attitude, because I will second against myself. I used to not pick up my guitar. To get dusty, I'm just like, I used to. And you hold up to say, when this happens, then this will happen. I remember with this whole, if you listen to some of my podcasts before, my wife now, she was in Korea teaching English, and I said, we made a decision really quickly. It's scary. She came back, broke her contract. We got a place. I started working here, and we made something. So for me, it was scary. I rather, like I said from the beginning, I rather be uncomfortable a lot than be bitter, or like you would say, think about what I didn't do. A lot of times we're too worried. The worry is just what freezes us. But I am very inspired. I do appreciate it. Thank you, Terry, so much. All the everything, all the note, those who are listening, everything that you want to find out more about Terry will be in the notes and in the description of this. I want to get you back here, Terry. You know, the February. I know I do it. I want to. I do love. You know, each month. You know, there's always a theme, but also I like paying tribute to something that's important. And I feel World Cancer Day is a huge thing, and just the idea that in life you don't know how short it is, and I do love how inspired and how passionate you are. Thank you again for agreeing to be a guest with us today.
You're more than welcome. And let me, I guess, kind of jump on what you were talking about suicide earlier. One of the things I did in my life is I was a hostage negotiator on a police SWAT team. And so for all the people, you're right. If you need help, seek help. But for all the other people out there who see somebody or think they see something that, they might want to, I don't know, maybe that person's thinking about hurting themselves, go ahead and ask them. You're not going to put the thought into their mind. You're not going to make them do it if you ask. If they're not thinking about hurting themselves, they're going to tell you you're nuts and to back off. But if they are, you might be giving them the opening they need to, open up to you or get the help that they need. So don't be afraid to ask if you think somebody's maybe wanting to hurt themselves.
Yeah, and that little uncomfortableness to ask that question, it saves lives. And I really appreciate you mentioned that. This podcast was inspired by the fact that some of these topics are uncomfortable to talk about, but I wanted to create as much as a safe place. There's no judgment. It's an outreach. It's not required to be faith-based. I have a faith-based background. I do not restrict people from sharing it, but at the same time, it's about hope. It all comes back to hope. Thank you so much, Terry. I wanted to share with those who are listening. Remember, Revive Ministries on the platform, reviveministriesfl.com. You can find out all what is updated. We're on Instagram, also on Facebook. You'll find the links in the notes. But this is goodbye for now from Revive Ministries Podcast, leaving you with this last quote from Maya Angelou, which said, "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can reduce. You can decide not to be reduced by."